Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo! After spending a couple of days in Mill Creek, we decided it's time to stop screwing around and get our asses back to Delaware City. For once, we're actually aided by the wind and we're able to make some giant strides up Chesapeake Bay, foregoing some of our normal anchorages, and we're actually able to eliminate one entire travel day off of the trip back to Delaware City. It's at this time that we start running into really heavy smoke from the wildfires in Canada, with one day leading to some pretty interesting, neat sights, and then it also leading to one day of pretty brutal travel, making it really hard to breathe. So I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. So grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's sprint together back to Delaware City.
My suitcase is packed and I'm wheeling. I'm on the move, out into the great wide open. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind. Climb to the top of a mountain. Fly around the world over oceans. Scrape out a living just for this feeling. Alive and well and I'm breathing. I'm on the move, out into the great wide open. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind. I'm on the move, out into the great wide open. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind.
After a couple of wonderful days in Mill Creek, we decided it was time to start steaming north again. We got up early the next morning and set our sights on the Solomons in Maryland. The Solomons is a really nice place to anchor. It's very well protected. You can go up, once you go up the Pax River, you can go up either Back Creek or, oddly enough, another Mill Creek and find a place to anchor. I've never had a problem finding a place to anchor up there. It can get very crowded at times, but I've always been able to find somewhere. But when I was going up the Pax River, I started looking at the latest wind forecast for that evening, and the wind was projected to be coming out of the south and not too heavily. And in the Pax River, there is an anchorage on the south side of the river, which is out of the seaplane lanes. And it's actually, it bumps right up next to an Air Force base, which is down on that side of the river. And I don't know the name of the Air Force base, I can't remember off the top of my head. But there is an anchorage there, and it's very exposed from the northeast. If there are northeast winds, you absolutely would not want to stay there because it would be blowing straight down the bay and slamming into you. But the winds were projected to be out of the south, so I decided to go ahead and give that anchorage a shot. And I got there around 4 o'clock. It did save me about 4 miles of travel time, which is about an hour and 15 minutes. And when I got there, it was nice. It's, you know, when I get to an anchorage that I'm not familiar with, it's always reassuring to see other boats there. And when I got there, there was another boat anchored there. And then I think 3 or 4 more came in that evening and all anchored in that area. So I felt that it was pretty safe to be there, and we didn't budge all night. Wind stayed out of the south. It was very, very calm, and we got a good night's sleep. So that was great. After a peaceful night's sleep in the Pax River, I got up early the next morning to check on the wind projections, and it looked like we could make the next leg of our journey. I knew it'd be like threading a needle with the wind for a good portion of the day, but I thought we could make it, so we decided to give it a try. As we were leaving our anchorage, I saw something that I was not expecting, and that was an old-timey looking boat, but it had AIS, the wily old devil. So I knew its name, and it was the Pride of Baltimore II. I didn't know anything about the boat, but you don't see apparently old wooden 2-masted clippers very often. So when I looked it up, it's actually not old at all. I think it was built in the mid-1980s. It's an interesting story. If you don't know anything about the Pride of Baltimore sailing ships, it's worth going online to check out. It's kind of a neat story. As we were leaving the Pax River, we were able to utilize the headsail, and the current was going in our direction, so we got a nice boost of speed. That changed pretty abruptly as we headed north up the bay. I knew we were going to lose the wind, and I knew we would lose it for probably 3 to 4 hours. So it was going to be a rough morning. We were pounding into the waves. We didn't make a ton of progress. We did make some progress, but it was a little uncomfortable. And then finally the wind came back around. It started to shift out of the northwest, and we could hug the east side of the bay, and it was like threading a needle, trying to stay on the wind. We were definitely out of the channel, which was okay. It was deep enough. But we were able to stay just on the edge of the wind heading north, and we were able to make decent time. I think we were going 5.5-ish knots, and that allowed us to make it further than we actually had planned on making. Whenever we're heading north up the bay is always more difficult than heading south down the bay, just the way the tides work out and the currents. So heading up is always a little bit more of a chore, and we had always stopped in Herring Bay. And Herring Bay, I think, was around 35-ish miles up the bay from where we were anchored. And Herring Bay is really exposed. It's basically just an indent in the side of Chesapeake Bay. It's not a great place to stay. But in that stretch, really, you don't have very many options. So when you're on a slow boat like ours, you stay where you have to sometimes. And especially when container ships come through there, it gets really rolly, even way on the side of the bay. It's not a great place to stay. So it was nice, since we were able to utilize the wind. We did make it about 10 miles further up the bay, and that allowed us to go up the West River, and then we could go up the Rhode River. And it was about 5 miles out of the way. I think that day we traveled a total of like 45-ish miles to get there. It was a long day, but we were able to get into a protected area. The wind was going to be blowing out of the north that night, and in the Rhode River, we were perfectly protected from that. It was a nice shallow anchorage. There were only a couple other boats there. It was a big anchorage, which was nice. So we were away from everyone, and it was another night of peaceful sleep. We got up early the next morning to continue our journey north, and this was the first time that the wildfires in Canada really began to affect us. It was really noticeable. We had seen a lot of the light smoke a few times earlier when we were in Deltaville. There were a few smoky days, but nothing like what we were going to see over the next 2 days. So as we left Rhode River, we headed north towards the bridge, the Bay Bridge, and there are a couple of parking lots in Chesapeake Bay for large transport vessels like oil tankers, container ships, that kind of stuff. And one of those parking lots is just south of the Bay Bridge. And I believe most of those ships that are anchored there are staged to wait to get called into Baltimore. I'm pretty sure that's where most of those ships are going. But when I was passing through there with the haze, it was really eerie. It almost looked like a ship graveyard after, in a post-apocalyptic world. It was really interesting. I thought it was kind of neat. I don't know, that might say something about me, but it was pretty neat going through there and seeing that. And there was one ship we had to, I had the head sail up, so we were riding right on the edge of the wind again this day. And I actually was able to use the wind all the way up till just north of the Bay Bridge, and then I lost it. But I did have to pass probably within 100 yards of one, I think it was an oil tanker, to stay on the wind. But just so no one yells at me for poor etiquette, I did call them on the radio and ask for permission to pass within that close to them. So, and they said fine, yep, no problem. So yeah, it was just it was an interesting experience. Looked a little surreal. I am not going to lie. I had a ton of fun putting that together. Oh my goodness. That's probably the most fun I've had putting together a video segment since the silent film way back in season 1. Oh, that was fun. Yeah, so anyway, that day we made it up. Normally we would have stayed in Magothi River, just south of Magothi River. There's a small creek. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but I normally stay there. But we actually made it quite a bit further up because we had been making longer strides in the first couple of days since leaving Mill Creek. We actually made it all the way up to Sassafras River that evening. And we anchored just on the south side of Sassafras River. And that allowed us to get to Delaware City one day sooner. And as you can see, this morning when we got up, the smoke was absolutely horrific. It was really hard to breathe. I have asthma. The day before, it was really hazy, really smoky, but it didn't affect my breathing. And this day, I just was coughing constantly. It was really bad. I could see boats on AIS that were a mile away from me, but I couldn't physically see them. Yeah, the visibility was limited. It was pretty bad. I did wear I had some N95 masks from when I was doing fiberglass work, and I wore one of those. I don't know if it helped any with the filtering out the smoke particulate. I'm not sure if it did any of that, but at the very least, it helped keep the air that I was breathing moist. And that cut down on my coughing quite a bit. So this was our final push up to Delaware City, and we were maybe 12, 13 miles from the C&D Canal. And once we got into the C&D Canal, we timed it so that the current would be pushing us through. And I love the C&D Canal. When the current's on your side, you just haul butt through there. I believe we're going like 5.8 to 6.2 knots almost the entire way through, so it's always a fun ride. We did make it back to Delaware City safe and sound, but there is one other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm genuinely interested. Anyone out there who is colorblind, please let me know if this has ever happened to you. I've only seen new colors once in my life, and that's when I was in Prince Creek and I saw the cypress trees. I didn't know how to process that color. So to me, that was like seeing a new color. It was really interesting. I'd never had that happen before. But my brain does get scrambled at times, and it had only happened once before this trip. My brain gets really scrambled during a total solar eclipse. And maybe even if you're normally color-sighted, this happens too, so I'm really curious if anyone has had this experience. During a total solar eclipse, everything gets really, really funky. It looks almost pixelated. Like anything that would have a soft edge, it almost gets scrambled, and it's like a bunch of little cubes make it up, and everything is moving pixels. It's a really, really bizarre sensation. And that happened also on this trip when the sun, during those hazy days, when the sun was reflecting off of the water, it just scrambled my brain. It just looked pixelated right around all of the sparkles in the water. I couldn't see the soft edges. Everything was cubes. It was really, really bizarre. I don't know how else to describe it. And I'm curious if anyone else has had that experience or sees it. I do see it in the video. It still scrambles my brain just a little bit looking at it, but it was nothing like what it was on the actual day when I was looking at it in person. So I'm just curious, has anyone ever had that experience? And if so, please write about it down below, because I'd be fascinated to know about it. And if I'm red-green colorblind, so just put in there what type you are. And even if you're normal sighted, if that's ever happened to you, if you've ever seen anything really bizarre, please write down below, because I'd like to know that. I'd like to find out about it. And that's all we have time for this week. I would love to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. Without your guys' support, I absolutely would not make these videos. And my Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, and Matthew Spotten. Thank you guys so very much for your support. It really means the world to me. And I do have one legacy patron member, and that is Joan Linbo. Unfortunately, she has passed on, but she will live on forever in our hearts. And quite frankly, she's doing the heavy lifting now. She's watching over my ass from up above, while the rest of you cheapskates are just throwing a few bucks my way. That was totally a joke. Not about her watching over me, because I know her and Grandma and John are, but yeah, I just joke about the other part of it. So I appreciate everyone's support, whether it's corporeally or terrestrially. I just can't talk. I should probably redo this, but I'm not gonna, because this has been a long video to put together, and I'm just gonna roll with it. Anyways, if you'd like to join our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that will take you to our Patreon page, where you can sign up for a couple bucks a month. It gives you access to all of the behind-the-scenes videos and photos. I try and post a few times a week. When I'm not traveling like I am right now, I'm not doing as many updates. Although now that I'm going to get back into doing boat projects, I'll start doing a lot of updates about that kind of stuff. So it gives you access to real-time data, what's going on, where we're at, and that kind of stuff. And you would help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us. It doesn't cost you guys anything, and it helps us out a ton, so we really appreciate it. But anyway, I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week. Did you want a meatball vegan? Did you want one? You want one, Hoob? Can you put your head in there? No. Did you want another one, vegan? Okay, don't bite, Hoob. Okay. Here you go, Joe. Here you go, fish. Yeah. You want one, Blue? Oh. A little bit too far. Good job, Blue.